The very first step of a basic reloading process can be decapping or removing the spent primer from the case, assuming you're using previously fired brass. Removing the primer at this step can be optional, but I will tell you a couple reasons why I think it's a good idea for you. First, you do need to remove the primer from the case at some point. This is typically done when your brass is the dirtiest, so it can keep some dirt and other garbage out of your typically much more expensive sizing dies. Since the decapping dies are universal, you don't need one for every caliber, so it's not a huge investment. The second reason to consider a universal decapping die of some point is because you could be decapping something that has crimped primer pockets. A lot of military brass has crimped primer pockets, and they can be much harder on standard decapping pins. Decapping pins can be replaced on standard sizing dies. However, once it's set up, I try to adjust it as little as possible. The third reason to consider using a universal decapping pin is in case you run into a Berdan flash hole. A lot of us are more familiar with boxer primers, but Berdan flash holes are very common in calibers like 7.62 by 54R as well as others. You're far more likely to run into this if you're buying bulk brass. If you run into one of those where your lead decapping die, hopefully you're going to notice that something is drastically different before you actually break your decapping pin. But breaking this isn't going to stop your entire reloading process. You're still going to be able to decap on your normal die if you need to. I prefer to deprime my brass with some sort of a universal decapping die. I have 3 different options in front of you, so much for universal, right? But each one of these provides a slightly different function. Our channel sponsor, Midway USA, carries all 3 of these options that we're going to go over, and hopefully this will help you decide which one might be right for you. Now, the die that gets the most action from me is Lee. These dies are generally very inexpensive, and they only perform one function, removing the primer. That is it. It's literally a pin that travels through the flash hole to remove the primer. This die can handle most calibers that you're going to want to deprime. The decapping pin on universal dies is usually a little bit stronger than a standard die, so it might hold up a little bit better than what's going to come with your standard resizing die. So if the Lee works for most stuff, what are the other 2 for, right? Great question. Our other 2 options here are from Redding. This Redding small decapping die can handle about the same amount of calibers as a Lee. However, this one is equipped to handle small flash holes. A standard flash hole is somewhere around 80 thousandths, while the smaller flash holes are somewhere around 59. If you run your standard decapping die through a small flash hole, you're going to damage your brass. Not what I want to do when I'm spending big bucks on premium brass. So why just not run the Redding and everything else? Well, this isn't quite as sturdy as something like the Lee. It's a little bit thinner. It does have a replaceable pin if you do break it. However, the annoying thing with this is it tends to hold onto the primers on the decapping pin. It's not a big deal, it's just annoying. So if I know I'm going to be decapping small flash hole brass, this is my go-to die, but that's pretty much all I use it for. I think Lee does offer decapping pins for smaller flash hole brass, but I would always have it set up in a separate die and only utilize it when I know I'm dealing with small flash hole brass. So what's our third option for? Well, larger brass. The Lee universal die can work with cases up to 0.560 inches in diameter, as well as 3.125 inches long. However, it just doesn't work for my 338 brass. For this, I use Redding's large decapping die, and it works with everything I've needed it to so far. My Lee has been working with everything from 223 all the way to 300 Win Mag, so this doesn't get a ton of work, but it's there when I need it. When you're adjusting a decapping die, the only thing you really need to be concerned about is that the pin protrudes through the flash hole far enough to eject the primer. That's all you're really concerned about. Nothing special. Technically, a decapping die is an optional die, but I think it's a great idea to have on your bench. It's very inexpensive, and if you're dealing with bulk brass at all, I really think it's something you should consider. Using some sort of a universal decapping die will make your sizing process just a little bit easier. It's going to keep your dies cleaner, and it will make your cleaning process more efficient if cleaning your primer pockets is something you care about. Cleaning is conveniently the next video right here. I'll see you in that video, and until then, stay safe in small groups.